Act 1. A dangerous decision. The year is 1870. The American Civil War is a fresh scar on the face of the nation, and a generation of men, hardened by conflict and hungry for a new start, are pushing westward. The air itself crackles with a raw, untamed energy, a spirit of manifest destiny. But this hunger for new land is eclipsed by a more potent, more feverish desire: the hunt for gold. The great California gold rush may have peaked, but its legends have echoed across the continent, promising unimaginable wealth to any man bold enough to seek it in the unforgiving wilderness. This fever has now crept north, across the border, into the newly formed Canadian territory of Alberta. Here, under the shadow of the colossal Rocky Mountains, the promise of a motherlode waiting to be discovered lures men of all kinds. This is a land of breathtaking beauty and chilling brutality, where the whisper of the wind through the pine forests can sound like a promise or a warning. In this vast wilderness, a small party of prospectors has been battling the elements for months. They are exploring the rugged headwaters of the Highwood River, a place of freezing streams and impenetrable forests near the formidable Crousnest Pass. Among this weary group are two men, bound by a friendship forged in the shared hardship of the frontier: Frank Lemon and his partner, known only as Blackjack. Frank Lemon is the younger of the two, his face not yet fully hardened by the sun and wind. In his eyes, the fire of ambition still burns brightly. He is a dreamer, a man who believes that his destiny, a life of unimaginable wealth, lies just beneath the next stone or around the next river bend. Blackjack is his perfect counterpart. Older, grizzled, his experience is etched into the lines of his face. He is a man who understands the mountain's cruel indifference. He has seen the gold fever drive men to madness, yet he too holds onto a sliver of hope that keeps him going. But after 3 months of relentless, back-breaking labor, hope is in short supply. The prospecting party has found nothing. Their supplies are dwindling, and the first bite of the approaching winter can be felt in the biting morning air. The group's leader, a practical man, makes the difficult but sensible decision: they are turning back. The search is over for the year, as the rest of the party begins to pack their horses, preparing for the long journey back to civilization. Lemon and Blackjack stand apart, their voices low and intense. "We can't turn back now, Blackie," Lemon insists, his voice filled with desperation. "I can feel it. We're close." Blackjack looks towards the jagged peaks, a deep line of concern on his brow. He knows the dangers of being caught in the mountains when the heavy snows arrive. But Lemon's fiery ambition is infectious. He speaks of a valley, a place the local Stony Nakota tribes are said to shun, a place whispered to be either sacred or cursed. It is this forbidden nature that convinces Lemon it must hold a great secret. He believes that where others see danger, he sees opportunity. After a long, tense silence, a slow nod from Blackjack seals their fate. They make a decision that is both brave and profoundly foolish. They will leave the relative safety of their party and venture on alone, deeper into the unknown. As they watch their companions disappear over the ridge, Lemon and Blackjack turn their horses towards the Forbidden Valley. Two men gambling their lives against the mountain's secrets, unaware that they are riding towards a discovery that will grant them their fortune and then demand their souls in return. Act 2. The River of Gold. Days turned into a week. Lemon and Blackjack pushed deeper into the Forbidden Valley, the silence of the wilderness broken only by the crunch of their horses' hooves on the rocky ground and the whisper of the wind through the tall pines. The landscape grew wilder, more imposing. The mountains seemed to lean in, their jagged peaks like silent, watching giants. The sense of isolation was absolute. Here, a man could vanish without a trace, and the world would never know. Their routine was grueling. They rose before the sun, their breath misting in the freezing air. They spent their days panning in the icy streams, their hands growing numb from the cold, their eyes straining to catch the telltale glint of yellow. Each evening, they would set up a small, cheerless camp, huddled around a crackling fire, eating their meager rations of dried meat and hardtack. The initial excitement had faded, replaced by a grim, dogged determination. Blackjack's face grew more stoic, his silence heavier. Lemon's youthful optimism was being eroded by the day, chipped away with every empty pan of gravel. One afternoon, as they followed a small, unnamed creek that fed into the Highwood River, Lemon was ready to give up. "It's no use, Blackie," he muttered, tossing a pan of worthless pebbles back into the stream. "There's nothing here. We were fools to stay." Blackjack, ever the pragmatist, simply grunted in agreement, but continued his slow, methodical panning. Lemon, in his frustration, decided to take a short break, leaving Blackjack by the stream. He climbed a small, rocky hillock to get a better view of the surrounding terrain, hoping to spot a geological formation that might signal the presence of gold. As he stood on the ridge, a strange glint of light from the creek bed below caught his eye. It was different from the usual reflection of the sun on the water. It was a warmer, richer, yellower light. His heart began to pound. He scrambled back down the hill, his boots slipping on the loose rock. "Blackjack, look!" he shouted, his voice cracking with a mixture of hope and disbelief. He pointed a trembling finger towards a spot in the creek where a small cascade of water tumbled over a series of flat rocks. There, nestled in a crevice, was a nugget of gold. It wasn't a flake. It was a solid, heavy, thumb-sized piece of pure, raw gold. The sight was electrifying. They scrambled into the freezing water, their exhaustion forgotten. They began to find more. Small nuggets at first, then larger ones, scattered along the creek bed as if a giant had spilled a bag of treasure. It was clear that these nuggets were being washed down from a source further upstream. The motherlode! It had to be close. With a renewed, almost manic energy, they followed the golden trail. The further they went, the richer the deposits became. The creek led them to a small, hidden waterfall cascading down a rock face. And there, behind the curtain of water, was a sight that would forever be seared into their minds. It was a massive, exposed vein of quartz, and it was shot through with thick, heavy ribbons of pure gold. It was not a mine. It was a treasure chamber, a wall of unimaginable wealth, created by nature and hidden for millennia. For a long moment, the two men could only stare, their minds struggling to comprehend the scale of what they had found. They had done it. They had found a fortune that would make them richer than kings. They whooped and hollered, their triumphant shouts echoing through the silent valley. But as the sun began to set, casting long, dark shadows across their golden discovery, a new, colder feeling began to creep into their hearts. A feeling of suspicion. A feeling of greed. Act 3. The Curse of the Gold. As darkness fell upon the valley, the triumphant mood of the two prospectors began to change. The sheer, overwhelming reality of their discovery settled upon them like the cold mountain air. They built a large, roaring campfire, not just for warmth, but to ward off the encroaching shadows and the silent, pressing weight of the wilderness. The immense treasure, glinting from the rock face just yards away, was no longer just a symbol of their success. It was a burden, a secret of immense and dangerous value. The easy camaraderie they had shared for months was gone. In its place, a thick, unspoken tension grew between them. They sat on opposite sides of the fire, the crackling flames illuminating the suspicion in their eyes. Every glance seemed to be a calculation. Every moment of silence was filled with unspoken questions. Who owned this treasure? Was it a 50-50 split? Who would be the one to go back and file the claim? To trust a single soul with this knowledge was a risk of unimaginable proportions. The man who filed the claim could easily cheat the other, leaving him with nothing. The gold fever, that notorious madness of the frontier, began to take hold. The wilderness, which had been their shared challenge, now felt like a lonely, dangerous prison. The mountains were no longer just watching. They were judging. The tension finally snapped. The exact trigger is lost to legend, but it's believed a heated argument erupted. Perhaps Blackjack, the more experienced and cautious of the two, insisted on a careful, methodical plan. Perhaps Lemon, consumed by a frantic, youthful greed, wanted to grab as much as he could and run. The argument would have escalated, their angry voices echoing off the silent rocks, the trust between them shattering like brittle glass. What happened next is the dark heart of the legend, a moment of brutal, irreversible betrayal. In a sudden explosion of violence, driven either by a calculated plan or a spontaneous fit of gold-induced madness, Frank Lemon grabbed the one tool that was always present at their camp, their felling axe. The firelight would have caught the glint of the polished steel as he raised it high. Blackjack, perhaps turning to argue, would have seen the crazed look in his friend's eyes in the final second of his life. The act was swift and brutal. The sickening thud of the axe striking home was the only sound, followed by a profound and chilling silence. Frank Lemon stood panting in the firelight, the axe heavy in his hand, the body of his friend and partner lying at his feet. He was now the sole owner of the greatest gold discovery in Canadian history. But the price was murder. As the horrifying reality of his action washed over him, the triumph of discovery was replaced by a wave of pure, abject terror. He was alone in a cursed valley, with a mountain of gold and the body of the man he had just killed. The curse of the lost Lemon Mine had claimed its first victim. Act 4. The Madman's Tale. The first light of dawn crept over the mountain peaks, illuminating a scene of pure horror. The campfire had died down to smoldering embers, and near it lay the still, cold body of Blackjack. Frank Lemon, who had spent the night in a state of terrified paralysis, was jolted into action by the morning light. The gold, which had gleamed so beautifully the day before, now seemed to mock him, its luster tainted by the blood on his hands. He did not take a single nugget. The thought of the gold now filled him with a profound dread. His only instinct was to flee, to escape the valley, to escape the ghost of the man he had murdered, and to escape the all-seeing eyes of the mountains. He scrambled to his horse, his hands trembling so violently he could barely hold the reins. He galloped away from the camp without a backwards glance, leaving behind the greatest fortune in North America and the body of his only friend. His journey back was a descent into madness. He rode recklessly through the treacherous terrain, fueled by adrenaline and terror. He didn't eat or sleep. The vast, silent wilderness was no longer a place of opportunity, but a living, breathing entity that was hunting him. Every shadow seemed to hold the shape of Blackjack. Every gust of wind sounded like his dying gasp. Days later, half-starved and delirious, Lemon stumbled into a small trading post at the edge of the frontier. He was a terrifying sight. His clothes were in tatters, his face was gaunt, and his eyes were wide with a feverish, haunted look. He collapsed in front of the post, babbling incoherently about a river of gold and a terrible bloody secret. He was taken in and cared for, and as his physical strength slowly returned, his story began to spill out in a torrent of guilt and fear. He confessed everything to a local missionary priest. He described the magnificent vein of gold in breathtaking detail, but his descriptions of the murder were fragmented, choked with sobs and whispers of a curse. He claimed the spirit of Blackjack was constantly with him, watching him, ensuring he would never know a moment's peace. News of a massive gold strike, even one tied to a murder, spread like wildfire. Other prospectors, their own eyes now gleaming with gold fever, saw an opportunity. They pressed Lemon for details, for a map, for any clue that could lead them back to the cursed valley. But they found that the man's mind was as broken as his spirit. The trauma of the event had shattered his memory. He could remember the gold, he could remember the murder, but the exact location of the mine was a complete blank. He could not, or would not, lead anyone back. The path to the immense fortune was locked away in the mind of a madman. Act 5. A legend etched in stone. Frank Lemon never returned to the mountains. He lived out his days as a broken, haunted man, forever looking over his shoulder for the ghost of his partner. But the story he unleashed took on a life of its own, growing from a madman's confession into one of the most enduring legends of the North American frontier. The legend of the lost lemon mine. The tale spread like wildfire through the prospector camps and boom towns of the West. It had all the perfect ingredients: a fortune beyond imagination, a brutal murder, a descent into madness, and a treasure protected by a powerful curse. For the next 150 years, the lost lemon mine would become the obsession of countless adventurers, treasure hunters, and dreamers. Hundreds of expeditions, both large and small, have been launched to find it. Prospectors have spent their entire lives and fortunes searching the rugged valleys of the Crousness Pass, armed with little more than Lemon's vague, traumatized descriptions. They have scoured the creeks and examined the rock faces, all hoping to be the one to rediscover the river of gold. But the curse of the mine, it seems, has held strong. None have succeeded. Many have returned empty-handed and broken-spirited. Some have vanished into the wilderness, just as Blackjack did, adding their own tragic postscripts to the legend. The mine has become a graveyard of dreams. Historians have debated the truth of the story for decades. Records show that men named Frank Lemon and Blackjack did exist, and were prospecting in Alberta in the 1870s. The details are murky, and the story has undoubtedly been embellished over years of being told around campfires. But the core of the tale, two partners who struck it rich, followed by a violent and tragic end, persists as a plausible, if unproven, event. In the end, the search for the lost lemon mine is no longer just a search for gold. It is a search for the truth behind a legend. The story serves as a dark and powerful cautionary tale about the destructive power of greed. Frank Lemon may have found a fortune, but in doing so, he lost his partner, his sanity, and his soul. The real treasure was not the gold, but the thrilling, terrifying story it created. A legend that remains lost and waiting, locked somewhere deep in the heart of the unforgiving Rocky Mountains. What do you believe is the truth behind the lost lemon mine? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And for more tales of legendary mysteries and lost treasures, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Dark Cell Stories.